Hey guys, welcome to Joe Knows. So great to have you watching in. We have been talking about a series I've titled Parenting for a Lifetime. And it really has a lot to do with influence. And we've been talking about raising children when they're young and as they move into adolescence. And I've been talking about now teenagers and how to raise teenagers. So as when we started, we talked about a baseball batting average of 300 creates a Hall of Fame kind of player. But really what that means is that 7 out of 10 times that player comes to the plate, he fails. But 3 out of the 10 times he succeeds. And we talked about when it comes to parenting, big picture, you're going to have a lot of failures. But if you keep getting up to the plate, you'll have enough successes, even if it's only 3 out of 10, that it'll make you a Hall of Famer in the eyes of your children. And we want to really talk about going further because we're talking about teenagers now. And with teenagers, it really involves influence. You're moving from the authority stage to having influence in their lives. And I want to give you another analogy, another sports analogy. I want to talk about football. Okay, so a football team starts a season and their goal is to the goal is to win the Super Bowl. But the first thing they have to do is make the playoffs. So they play the entire season, and let's say they qualify for one of the wild card places. So they play a game, a wild card game, it's called. And if they win that game, they move on and they play in the divisional series. They're playing other divisional rivals, and if they win that game, they move on and they play for what's called the conference championship. So now that's the third playoff game. They had to keep winning, and then if they win that game, the conference, they go and play in the Super Bowl. But really getting to the Super Bowl and losing, I don't know. Sometimes some guys would rather not make it than make it and lose. But the name of the game in football is to win the Super Bowl, okay? So as you're parenting your children, maybe they're young and they love Jesus and they're saying they're 5 years old, oh, and they pray and I love Jesus. They pray for their food. They pray at night. That's really wonderful, but that's not the goal. The goal is not to have little kids that follow Jesus. It's to have them. You want to win the Super Bowl, which involves, as adults, them taking on following Christ and living productive lives. So as they get a little bit older, maybe it's the wild card game. You make the playoffs, you get in there, but you've got to continue winning. Okay, you can't be satisfied with making it to the playoffs or making it to the division championship. The really great ones in football, they want the ring. They want to win the Super Bowl. And as a parent, I want that to be your goal. Now, here's the difference between football and parenting. In football, one team wins. In parenting, everyone can win. So we want you to be a football. When it comes to parenting, we want you to win the Super Bowl and have your child be a Super Bowl champion. So to do that, you're going to have to get them through a really tough opponent. It's called the adolescent years, teenagers. Okay, so talked about a little bit about this last week. I want to expound on it more, and I'm not even going to be finished. We're going to talk about teenagers again next week. But there are 3 things you're going to have to do when your kids are teenagers to help them to be the kind of children you want them to be. Okay, and there are areas that are not easy to talk about, but you're going to have to do it. And the first one is sexuality. Now, in this day and age, we have confused that completely. And if you're like me and you want your children to have God's view of their sexuality, then you're going to be swimming upstream in a society that is very, very confused. So you want to be able to teach them when they're young the fact that God made them male and female. Now, there are people that reject that, but that is a rejection of God and what God has said. He said he made them male and female. Okay, so they need to understand that there's a difference, and it doesn't have to do with their preferences and the toys they like to play with and the way they talk or things like that. It has to do with their sexuality that God has ordained, and it's determined at birth. And there are biological things that help us to understand very clearly where we fit. And you want them to understand that. You also want them to understand that their identity is not in their sexuality, it's in Christ. It's in the fact that God made them and loves them. And you're going to have to help them to navigate through upstream and to try to to experience their sexuality, to express it in a way that God designed. It's the way it works best. So we're talking about a man and a woman um, not being intimate with each other until they are married to each other. Now, I've taught my children that from as early as they could understand it, and I've reinforced it over and over and over again. But I've always known it's going to be a choice they make, whether they wait until they're married to have sex, to have heterosexual sex, and all of those different things. But as you are helping them to understand that and having conversations with them, not in a judgmental way. There are people that don't do things God's way. I was one of those people, in maybe not in the area of sexuality, although I was extremely heterosexually active before I became a Christian. But we can learn from our mistakes, and we don't judge people that do it differently. But we need to set the bar where God put it and help them understand God's plan for sexuality. It was His idea, and He created us. He knows how we work best. So you want to take those years to reinforce those things in a loving and non-judgmental way. Second thing you're going to have to help them with is this area of substance abuse. Okay. Now, right now you're thinking of drugs, and we know drugs are wrong, but it's not as easy to say. It probably never was as easy to say that, but we did. But right now, so you say, well, don't do illegal drugs. Great. That's great. Heroin, opiates, methamphetamine, all those things. We have examples of how they destroy lives. But then you get to this area of, what do they call it? Marijuana or weed. Okay. And, so you say, well, it's against the law. Why is it wrong? It's against the law. Well, that's true in Texas. It's not true in some other places in this country. And I want to challenge you to not just tell your kids don't do things. I want you to think it through, because I'll tell you what, I have a tough time thinking that that smoking weed is any worse than a person who abuses alcohol. One is legal, one is culturally acceptable, but I see a lot of destruction from people who abuse alcohol. And I would recommend that you have some conversations with your teenagers where you help them think through what is actually true. They're not going to just believe the things that we've said in the past because we say them. Because, listen, we know that marijuana has some positive benefits. It's used medicinally. And so navigating your child through that is going to take conversation. You're not going to just tell them what's right and they're going to say yes, and tell them what's wrong and they're going to say yes. You need to help them think it through, and you may need to think it through a little bit and see how you view it. I know that I have had these conversations with my children. They know exactly where I stand. They haven't always followed me, but they understand what I believe, and I've tried to set the bar as high as I can. You're going to need to do that. The last area I want to talk to you about is something that is very practical. I want to talk about education, but I want to talk about it from this point. It's not really about grades, okay? Education is not about getting grades, even though we've set it up that way. That's why are you an A student? Are you a B student? A plus, B plus, C, D, all that stuff. Our educational system is set up so that for a certain type person, a type person that hears information while sitting in a seat, remembers the information, reads, writes, memorizes things, takes a test, and parrots back the information the teacher wants. And that's all well and good. And for some people, they learn well that way. But other people are not wired that way. And perhaps you have a child that struggles with ADD. It's mostly young boys, young men that struggle with ADD, but there are women that do as well, mostly men, but they don't learn that way. And if them pleasing you in school has to do with them taking tests that aren't designed to measure knowledge the way that they actually receive it, then you're going to set them up for failure. They're going to start feeling like a failure at a very young age and maybe not even give into school. You see, it's not about getting grades. School is about learning. It's about learning and teaching your mind to grow and to develop. The mind is, I'm going to use this analogy. I know it's not biologically correct, but the mind is like a muscle that needs to be exercised and developed. So why do we learn biology? Or why do we learn geometry and trigonometry? Those things kids will tell you, hey, I don't need that. How am I going to use that in life? But what they're going to use is their mind. And as they learn some of these disciplines, they learn to use that mind. They expand their ability to absorb and have knowledge and gain knowledge. So I have a son, my oldest son. He got a master's degree. And he learned well in the classroom. He did great, and he's using it tremendously. My daughter, my second child, she got a degree in psychology. Okay, and she doesn't do anything in that area. She is a salesperson. She sells, and she's extremely successful, but not really using the things she learned in school, but did develop her mind in such a way that she was able to go through a process, get through school, take tests, write papers, and do all those things that actually help her to do the things that make her a successful saleswoman. My youngest son, he is a producer. He writes and produces music. He's very talented, very gifted. And he was the one, he was going into the music career. And I remember when he was 19, and I was like, man, I got to get him a backup plan because not everyone makes money making music. So I paid him to go to community college. He went there for about a year and a half. I found out years later that he was having his girlfriend take most of his tests and write his papers. So as bad as he was doing in school, it wasn't even his work. And one day he came to me, he said, Dad, you're wasting my time and I'm wasting your money. He said, instead of me going to learn about things that have no bearing in my life, would you pay for my online classes to learn how to do the thing that I'm passionate to do, that I think I'm called to do? And my son spent about $10,000 online taking classes. And now he has a studio in California, another studio here. He writes, he produces music and develops artists. And you've got to help your child to understand who they are and to help them to learn the things, not the grades, to learn the things that will help them be successful. So this is a challenge. It's not easy. Listen, when you get in the playoffs, first round, you may be playing a pansy team, but as you get up and up and up, the competition gets fierce, and raising teenagers is not easy. It's well worth it. Remember, if you bat 300, you fail 7 out of 10 times, you're a Hall of Famer. So you give it your best and help your children to deal through their sexuality, substance abuse issues, and teach them the importance of learning over getting grades. God bless you. I hope this is helpful. We'll continue talking about teenagers next week.